Good morning. I'd like to call today's council meeting open for February 10th. We're starting at 9:01 a.m. To the audience at home, we'd like to welcome you. Hopefully you've poured yourself a nice cup of coffee, threw in some Baileys. That would be always good. Feel free to drop one off at the front door. I'll come out and get one if you want. Wouldn't that be something if someone did show up? That'd be awesome. At this time, I'd like to confirm the agenda. As far as council is concerned, are there any emergent items that possibly need to be added to the agenda? Seeing none, I'll go to administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. We just have one item that needs to be removed, and that would be item 8.3.
Thank you. Did everyone hear that at home? Okay, thank you. And we have no presentations, but we do have a delegation this morning. And we have HDR Calthorpe here. Oh, sorry, that's right.
Yep.
We need to have a motion. Thank you, Councillor Sobel. We have a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. And I'll call all in favor. And the motion is carried. And now we have a delegation from HDR Calthorpe. For those of you at home who aren't sure what this all about, the Calgary Metropolitan Region Board has contracted HDR Calthorpe to do a growth and servicing plan report, and they will be presenting to us today on their work so far. It's going to be coming before the board at a later date to possibly approve and accept as a plan report. So if we have anyone from HDR Calthorpe who would like to begin their presentation and address to us, that would be awesome.
Mr. Mayor, I think Jordan is trying to get into the meeting, but it says someone needs to let him in.
Okay, thank you. Is that you, Lisa?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we'll just hang on until we can get a few more in. Jordan is there now?
I see Jordan is here now.
I believe so. Do we have, was someone from, Jonathan, are you presenting from Calthorpe today?
I'm not presenting. However, I'm waiting for my teammates from HDR Calthorpe, but I think Jordan could perhaps begin here.
Okay. I can kick us off, Your Worship, if that is
sure,
all right
with you. We have Jordan Copping here, who is the CAO of the Calgary Metropolitan Region Board, and he'll be speaking to start us off. Welcome, Jordan.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, members of council. My apologies, a little bit of technical difficulty getting into the meeting there. However, very happy to be here. Very happy to give a little bit of background on the process that has brought us to where we are right now, and a little bit of insight into the go forward from here today. So the Calgary Metropolitan Region Board regulation requires that the growth and servicing plans be delivered no later than December 31st of 2020. However, as the pandemic onset and then deepened, it became pretty evident that meeting that deadline was going to be a bit of a challenge due to meeting virtually, such as we're doing right now. So in consultation with the consultant that the board had hired, HDRC, it was decided that we would request a 4-month extension from the Minister of Municipal Affairs. We sent that letter to the Minister in June of 2020 and received a response in October of 2020, granting us a 2-month extension. We worked with the consultant to refine the work schedule from a 4-month extension back to a 2-month extension, and then proceeded to carry out that work schedule. Even though I would say, and definitely Mayor Fuel and Councillor Sobel and others can attest to the pretty hectic pace, it became obvious in later January that the timeline was not enough to deliver the best quality plan we could for members of the Calgary Metropolitan Region. And so at the January 29th meeting of the board passed a motion to request an extension from the minister. So the motion had 3 portions to it. 1, agreeing that the board would request an extension. 2, requesting that staff would provide a work schedule putting together all of the tasks that were required to get us to completion of a workable and best-in-class growth plan for the region, and that the extension be no later than June the 1st, 2021. We had circulated via email to board members on Monday that work schedule, and we are anticipating sending the letter to the minister no later than Friday this week requesting the extension. However, the minister has been made aware that a request for an extension is coming, so it will not be a surprise to them. So if we are granted the extension, there are two kind of streams of work that I just want to highlight for members of council here. One is another round of public engagement was raised by multiple members that they wanted to engage on actual draft plan. And so we have included that in our proposed work schedule. And the second part was to take the time to finalize the vision for the Calgary Metropolitan Region Board. As while the vision and the goals of the plan have been discussed a lot, an overall vision for the board has yet to be finalized. So with those two pieces, along with others that will be required to finalize the plan, that is currently with members of the board for their review and hopeful approval. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions, but I don't know if anyone else from, I see Peter Calthorpe is here. So thank you very much, Your Worship, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Jordan, for that brief review. And council, do you have any questions for Jordan at this time? Seeing none, we'll go to Peter Calthorpe. Peter, good morning. I'm just checking to see are you coming to us from California right now?
Yes, I am.
Well, I'd like to point out to you that it's minus 30 here, and it was minus 34 last night with a wind chill in close to minus 40, and you're in California, so way to go.
Yeah, anyway. Well, there are benefits to COVID, which is that we don't always get on the airplane now.
That's right. That's good. You're in a nice and warm place. Welcome this morning. We are absolutely ready for your presentation, and our counselors are interested in hearing more about the growth plan report and how we're coming along so far. I think our board has been very proactive as far as trying to get enough time for your group to put together the best possible report as it can be. So we're looking forward to hearing from you, and welcome again this morning.
No, thank you. Do you want me to just present from my screen here?
I think that would be fine. Yeah, that's perfect. We have a large screen here, and our counselors are able to see it all as well.
All right, then. Let me go to full screen if I'm sharing now. Do you see that now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, this has been, I don't know who else from my team is here today. I've been leading this effort, extraordinary opportunity and, unique and challenging. Stephen Powers, our local project manager, and Charlie Hales, who was the mayor of Portland, has worked with me on many regional plans in the past, is also part of the leadership team for this project. Today, I'm going to focus in on growth management and land use. Charlie and Steve will come on and talk about some of the other elements within the plan, but the foundation is really the land use, and from everything else, and it kind of forms the basis for all the other components. And so we wanted to focus in on that the most. So today may be a day where this slide is not applicable. This is meant to say, hey, it's better to do these things in person. You get a better sense of what people are after. You get a better sense of the place. You get a better sense of the community. All sorts of good things happen when you meet in person and you brainstorm together and you put hand to paper together. Now, maybe in these temperatures, it wouldn't work so well, but this is where we are. And quite frankly, it has been difficult. I think one of the reasons we're looking at an extension is just that we've had such a difficult time trying to find a way to communicate completely and creatively over online. This is just an overview of where we've been and kind of what I'm going to talk to you about. Information is critical, getting it right, understanding the place, and then, of course, filling up a very complex computer model we use to generate scenarios and also analyze scenarios. as part of our process is informed by all the information we get. The scenarios themselves are really the key kind of experiment phase, crash test dummies, look at different patterns of growth and types of growth, and then see what the results are across a whole range of metrics. And then we have to turn those into policies that can be adopted and implemented. Overall, I got to say that the experiences I had in Calgary before COVID locked us down were really, really positive. I saw a region that's avoided so many of the worst problems of other cities of North America: the congestion, the loss of affordable housing, which is so typical in other regions, really hasn't reached you yet. And so, to a certain degree, this entity and this exercise is meant to keep you on the positive track and not let you fall prey to the problems and the challenges that are so prevalent as cities grow. We're looking at how do you accommodate the next million people, and how not only keep that into a positive framework, but actually to make Calgary a great example of what sustainable growth is all about. The feedback we get made it clear everybody understands that now in the current world, regions have to be globally competitive. City by city is, great environments for small communities and people to live, but economically and environmentally, the region is the scale at which the most significant opportunities are manifest. It's a challenge now to make sure the next wave of new talent and well-educated people that drive the economy are attracted to your region. And so diverse places to live and beautiful environments and effective transport, these are all the kinds of things and great education systems that attract people. The plan also has to do some straightforward work, make sure that taxpayer dollars are conserved, and shared infrastructure and collaboration gets to be at the heart of that, which is what regional planning is all about. Better communities is really what it boils down to. And we saw a lot of good communities. There's always room for better, reducing land consumption and increasing walkability and personal health, and increasing quality of life. That's really what this plan is focused on. The interim growth plan started with these three very simple propositions: to integrate and make more efficient shared regional infrastructure. Water, of course, comes to the top of that list in terms of both distributing it effectively and preserving it and making sure that water quality is maintained. This is one of the most unique and powerful challenges of your region. And encouraging efficient growth, and what everybody talks about now is sustainable communities, is something that you guys have been practicing for some time. This is a region where mixed-use development and compact development and transit-oriented development are all familiar terms, and they're kind of normative. And so it's a really great place to start, kind of high on the performance levels to start with. The databases, of course, filled the maps with information, an incredible amount of information. This is one anecdotal map, though, that shows all the ASPs in the region, which really indicates that there's more than enough land that's already put in through entitlement to absorb well more than 1 million people. So the real challenge of this regional plan is how to focus that growth in ways that are going to be most fortuitous, most efficient, and have the smallest environmental and ecological impact and create the best communities. But there's plenty to work with here. Public input was direct and also very, very progressive. People wanted more density and they wanted to decrease sprawl. I think everybody's rightly afraid of the failures that we've had in North America in terms of sprawling cities that just end up destroying the land and not really producing affordable housing and creating lifestyles where people spend too much time commuting. This is not a future that any region wants. And the feedback from the public is pretty clear on that. Work with what you have, which, as the real meaning of that, of course, is that you have a lot, and you want what comes out of this to be unique to Calgary. The choice and diversity is key. I saw everything from an astounding downtown to Calgary's neighborhoods to small cities and small towns such as yours. A complete range of lifestyles already present that need to be preserved, enhanced, actually highlighted in this plan. The public wants more collaboration, and it seems like that's one of the areas that it has been deficient. Too often, jurisdictions just go off on their own and do their own thing, and they could benefit from more coordination. The environment, of course, climate change, these are things now that are high on people's minds and need to be addressed, I think, in an aggressive way. The developers in your community need a roadmap, a set of directions that are clear, that they can depend on. And so that's another purpose of a regional plan. And that leads, of course, to economic development. I think at the base, these four simple principles are at the heart of what good regional planning is all about. First is the realization that nobody's isolated. Everything nests and connects to everything else, and everything affects everything else. And so there's no islands in the region. And that's a really important thing. And the forms of connectivity from regional highways and trucking capacities and freight to transit, to arterials, and then walkable neighborhood streets. It's all about how people connect. The next thing is, we all know now what it takes to create great community. You have one where you're sitting right now, it's diversity and balance. It's a mix of things, housing and commercial development and jobs, and civic elements, all put together in a way that makes a coherent whole. That diversity and balance is really the kind of planner's realization after we spent 50 years building isolated subdivisions and shopping malls and things that disaggregated the things that really bring a community together. Human scale, likewise, be too often lost when we shape the environment around parking lots and arterials instead of sidewalks and bikeways and places for people. And then, of course, underlying it all now is this need for conservation and restoration. Repair the stuff that's gone bad. Infill and redevelopment is the kind of physical manifestation of that, but there's an environmental manifestation to preserve waterways and floodplains and ag, to preserve habitat. Those are the things that I think are at the heart of everybody's mind. So where did we start? We started by realizing that every jurisdiction in the region is doing a good job. There's a lot of city-centered development that is coherent. More often than not, we saw each jurisdiction looking to reinforce their town or village center with infill, and that they were building neighborhoods that really were mixed use. And so it was just a matter of reinforcing that fundamental trend as a starting point, and quite frankly, as a major point. There's key high growth areas close to Calgary that are destined for a large percentage of the new growth, and it keeps it compact. It keeps it near the core. It doesn't kind of overwhelm the smaller jurisdictions like yours or Okotoks and High River, Cochrane. They're not overloaded with urban growth so that they can maintain the quality of place that they have. The model, as I mentioned, starts with extensive data sets, and then we build these scenarios, which I'll show you some examples of, and then they lead to a whole set of metrics. There's no one criteria, although water is probably the biggest criteria in your region. There's no one criteria should rule all other ones. Public health, efficient transportation, building energy use, water use, greenhouse gas emissions, household costs, and the land consumption, and of course, the balance sheets for each jurisdiction. These are all things that become manifestations of major choices about land use, development patterns, locations, densities, mixes. They all are affected by all of that. So it's really an important set of choices. Our models use place types, not land use zones. The place types are mixed use at different densities and different proportions, different levels of walkability and transit viability. And so these place types are the building blocks. And it became apparent early on that maybe these building blocks were the language that the policies could use to create the right quality of place. As I said before, I don't think this is just a matter of quantities and locations. It's a matter of trying to move towards a high quality set of developments in the right places at the right densities. So we took the time to go out and explore the region and find examples of each place type. And there's a huge range that's been built there. There's the agricultural zone areas and rural areas that in some cases are developed into large lot, rural residential where people can have horses and really live close to the land. There's your standard subdivision, which is on the decline right now. But the single use environment that's not well integrated with local destinations become an environment where everybody uses their car for everything. And so it's a less preferred development type, and it's certainly one that has happened and will continue to happen. The question is where and how much. I saw a lot of really great master plan communities in your region. Developers seem to have developed a clear understanding of how to mix different housing types, costs for different kinds of people, whether it's single people or families or elderly, high income, low income, working income, all mixed together in environments where the things that make community are close at hand, whether it's shops and services or parks and schools and rec centers. It's really wonderful to see people put the piece together to get, the old adage, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. A denser version of that, the mixed-use center, used in some jurisdiction for their visioning for their town center and the infill and the intensity that it needs. Or in Calgary, used a lot at the TOD areas where they can have a higher percentage of major commercial and job-oriented uses and a higher density of housing, all close to transit in a cluster. There are industrial parks, and they need, you need to be able to absorb every form of employment and economic development in the region, from these kind of standard environments to specialty places in the rural areas that are focused on agriculture and resource extraction. Office parks are typical, but one wonders whether it wouldn't be better for these kinds of white-collar buildings to land in the midst of a TOD or a mixed-use center. They are pedestrian-friendly. They would benefit from having those shops and restaurants within walking distance, as the region would benefit from them being near transit. So we shaped 3 preliminary scenarios for the next million. The base case, the business as usual, is lower density and more spread out. And the other 2 were variations on 2 themes. Compact was a real focus on infill and redevelopment, and TOD was a focus on more transit and more transit-oriented development. We then developed a 3rd scenario, which was a combination of compact and TOD, and we call the synthesis plan. It looks something like this, where once again, the foundation is each jurisdiction building well within its boundaries and doing a great job of infill redevelopment and mixed-use development. There are 3 what are called joint planning areas these are overlapping zones that are destined for development because they're on major corridors and actually are already zoned for major job growth. And so getting it right there in terms of mobility, in terms of environmental factors, in terms of jobs, housing balance. And it's an opportunity for jurisdictions within the region to work together. And that kind of collaboration over systems, design, and providing services and sharing the costs of those services. These are the overlap areas. And so this is where collaboration really comes to the foreground. And the model showed that this kind of development for the region really has stunning positive outcomes. A 35% reduction in the cost of new infrastructure. So there really are efficiencies that can be had through the compact and more focused development patterns. A 40% reduction in land consumption. That's more ag and open space preserved. And I think most people in the region appreciate that. A 15% reduction in water and wastewater requirements. Now, remember, that's just in the land use, in the built environment, without adding the technologies of conservation within housing and commercial buildings. So there's a scale at which you're looking at land use, and scale at which you're looking at standards for how buildings get put together in ways that use less water. A 25% reduction in carbon emissions. Once again, this is just through the planning side of things. Building energy standards will reduce that, will increase that reduction more and more. A reduction in greenhouse gases coming out of out of transportation, which is a reflection of lower VKT, vehicle miles traveled. The data is there to say, yes, these kinds of development patterns really do make a difference. And quite frankly, you're already doing them. And it's a matter of this regional plan organizing them in a way that's more compact and coherent, and also sets some standards for each, maybe ups the ante a bit. Some on the board asked to see, well, what's a comparison between putting housing in mixed-use center and a master plan community versus just building the same old subdivisions? And so the numbers there are equally stunning in terms of environmental, social, and economic consequences all being very, very positive. Though there's a lot of that in the report, finally. So our next step was to take that knowledge that there really was value in shaping the region around these city center growth policies and the JPAs and other tools. And we came up with this set of tools. In a way, too many people think of a regional plan as a map. There's another zoning map that everybody's got to comply with and deal with. No, actually, it's a set of tools that the region can use over time to shape growth. And the tools are, number one, preferred place types, an understanding that the region wants to grow with mixed-use, walkable, transit-oriented development as opposed to auto-oriented subdivisions and shopping centers and office parks. So that's the first tool. And so they're defined in the policies as infill and redevelopment, mixed-use TOD, and master plan community. Those are what are preferred, and some minimum standards for how they operate and how much of growth gets directed towards those qualitative, not just locational development patterns. Focusing the new growth in the JPAs. The JPAs become a tool not just of capturing the market trends in terms of where development is headed, but also creating an opportunity for collaboration. It's one thing I think your region needs is the ability and the format for more collaboration, because out of collaboration comes trust, and out of trust comes working together in ways that create more efficient and better outcomes. At the same time that we focused on growth here, the rural environment the ground covered by the counties, need growth opportunities as well, and they need to be at the appropriate scale and density. And then, of course, the existing area structure plans are out there, and by law, they are grandfathered into place. So the map are, the elements are, as I said, that urban municipalities grow and reinforce their identity, their character, their sense of community, and their completeness. Complete communities where people really can have all the needs met within their community is a really important ingredient of how to live best. The joint planning areas I just covered, they tend to be areas that have a large quantity of existing ASPs dedicated to industrial and job creation. So they will be job centers. And the question is, how do you mix that with the residential and the transportation networks and the infrastructure? And then there is this other scale, rural hamlets. They exist as a jurisdictional entitlement for the counties. But the idea that there could be a rural village that sits in the landscape is another lifestyle. And so instead of having a lot of rural residential scattered across the landscape or cluster development that is really could become just hopscotch subdivisions, it'd be great to have mixed-use hamlets, villages, rural villages where people do have their own main street, their own local services and schools and parks, and have more of a complete community, but at the intimate rural scale. So those are the building blocks. These are the preferred development types. And, at the heart of this whole thing, sooner or later comes some standards. And so this is just a summary spreadsheet of the kinds of places that are foreseen, the kinds of development areas, and then a whole series of what the policies lay out as the qualities they want to achieve. So urban municipalities and JPAs are where the most urban, densest development will be happening in the plan. They're either within an urban area or at the urban edge. Their size is really about their forecast and their jurisdiction. Under a JPA, a joint planning area, the boundary can be adjusted by the participants. So there's flexibility in all of this, and therefore the amount of dwelling units. There are some, if you look down to the bottom row, probably the most important one, is standards would say, well, we would like 75% of development in the JPAs to be of the mixed use quality. Could be infill, could be master plan communities, could be mixed use communities. If there was transit or BRT running through it, there could be transit oriented development. But the idea is that the vast majority of the housing is provided in complete mixed use communities that are walkable, 75% specifically for JPAs, and 60% in the hamlets, the little villages that still can benefit from the outcomes of mixed use development. Employment is allowed obviously in urban municipalities, JPAs, and in hamlets, and then it's partially restricted in the rural areas. It wants there not to be scattered industrial parks, but more focused on agriculture supporting activities and resource extraction, things that can only happen in the countryside. There's size qualities. This hamlet idea, the proposal right now, and it is controversial, is that it's relatively small. It's not a new town. I don't think anybody's after a goal to build new towns and new cities in the region. These are rural villages that are small. They could be up to 7,000 units. They could have their own schools and parks and shopping area. And that could be a positive thing. It's important to note that the plan foresees that the board and at the request of any jurisdiction can entertain building, designating a new hamlet growth area or a new joint planning area. So over time, the regional growth pattern will change, but the quality of place, the urban and town centers, the JPAs, the hamlets, the quality of those places should remain similar in terms of density and mix. The rural country cluster has been quite controversial. 2-acre lots, although some people want to live that way, the market is pretty small for that. There was a proposal for country cluster where you would take entitlements and cluster them into subdivisions, effectively, low density subdivisions. And there's a lot of controversy on how big that should be. I personally don't think a 200-acre subdivision free floating in the rural landscape is a positive outcome. And if it wants to be that big, it should be part of a hamlet or become part of a JPA. The counties have 3 different areas in which to place growth under this plan. So the joint planning areas are places where growth impacts multiple municipalities, and they should share in thinking through what it is. They should be focused on joint servicing and utilities. And there's already a bunch of that going on ad hoc in the region, where there are municipal agreements over servicing. But we think that this could formalize that and make it more effective. Opportunities to benefit from the coordination and of that servicing, both in terms of cost and in terms of making more efficient utility systems. It's where sub-regional planning is appropriate. We're not saying that all 10 jurisdictions have to participate in every specific joint planning area. That's the beauty of it. And sometimes it's 2 jurisdictions, sometimes it's 3, but they will collaborate and they know that territory a lot better. They need to do context studies, which are defined in the document with a series of analysis that should be made to really understand how these areas could be planned better. And board can create new JPAs. These are the current preliminary joint planning areas. They've already been the subject of a lot of collaboration. The jurisdictions went back and forth and modified boundaries already, and that's just the beginning of how they're going to work out the best outcomes here. You'll see that the pinkish shaded areas are where the ASPs are. So you can see that these are areas that are destined for a lot of growth. The goal is to make it more coordinated growth. The hamlet growth areas, I think I've described already. They were meant to enhance the rural character with small villages that sit in the landscape in a way that's not disruptive to agriculture or the environment. And rural development also. This is maybe one of the areas that's most controversial. What kind of landscape do people want to see when they leave their town? Is it a series of subdivisions, clusters? How much industrial development should be scattered and how much should be focused? Of course, in Wheatland County, you have an industrial zone just to your west, and that's part of the plan. It is an established ASP, and it will develop, and there's a certain logic to it being right on the highway there. And maybe bringing jobs closer to your community is a really good thing. So none of that is excluded. And then there are policy exceptions that can be made. So this is not a rigid plan. The idea is that each jurisdiction can bring forward special cases that need special attention. So I think that's an overview of what we're doing with the land use side of this. The balance for the next 1 million people should offer a whole range of lifestyles and housing types and neighborhood types and locations. The growth should happen in ways that really care about conservation, both of land and resources. And then the fiscal dimension of this. It's important that the way you grow is sustainable in terms of efficient support systems. So I'm going to stop here and see if you have any questions and discussion. And then I believe Charlie or Steve going to carry on with the other policy elements?
Yeah, I'm here, Steve. Charlie, I'm here.
Yeah, we'll both be carrying on.
Okay, good. So any questions, thoughts, discussions?
Thank you, Peter. I just had a couple, and then I'll go to my council as well. One of the things we're facing in Strathmore that we're considering for a long time, even before the CMRB, there was a Calgary Regional Partnership. And we had moved to more falling in line with the density numbers set by the city and try to reduce urban sprawl. But it's sometimes hard to reconcile that with also trying to attract people to your town. So one of the draws, we have annexed a lot of land. The previous council did that. They did a really good job. It was a tough process. But we have a great deal of land for our future development. And I guess my question is, how do you reconcile trying to fit with the region's needs or desires to have higher density, yet a town like us may need to go with larger lot size to attract potential buyers and builders?
Well, there's a lot of flexibility in the standards. What's being said is not so much just density as the place type is terribly important. So when it says, for example, 75%, others mean places other than Calgary, will be in the mixed use types. Now, there's nothing to say that you couldn't lean most heavily on the Masterplan community, which has a kind of a minimum average density of 8 DUs per acre when you put together all the pieces. So 8, you can go down to 5 units per acre in pretty large parts of your master plan community, but you would probably have some apartment buildings for seniors mixed in there and maybe some townhouses. So by the time you average it out, it seems like a high number, 8. But the goal here is to have a range of densities blended together around a street network that allows kids to get to school in a park on foot, and and hopefully people to walk to some local services and shops. So looking at the market in the region, this seems to be a good fit. And we tried to make this as flexible as possible. We're not saying one size fits all. We're not saying you have to do, 20% of your development in high density TOD. You could choose to do 100% of that standard in master plan community. And then you still have 25% of your growth that can fall into any other category you want, any other form you want. So we hope it's flexible, and we actually tried to vary the standards. So not only, maybe it's complicated, basically it's saying if you had 100 or 1,000 units to build, 750 would have to end up in a mixed-use environment. Now, that mixed-use environment could vary in density, but the lowest density average would be 8 units per acre of that 75, which may seem too high for your community. But then, to get to 8, you could have a whole bunch of 5 unit per acre single family, and then you could have some apartments and townhouses, because people who retire may need, and want to stay in your community may need that. So it seems feasible. I hope it is. I hope you think it is. The one thing that's not allowed is rural residential. Within urban jurisdictions, we don't think 2-acre lots make sense. They're very expensive to service, and they tend not to function well in terms of the economics. So I hope, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. And I just had one more short one, and then I'll go to my counsel. I can't see you at this time, counsel, so we'll have to figure out how to motion you in. My other question, and it's something that came up in one of our workshops, and I remember you spoke on this, and it's something that's quite important to us on council, and it shows that commercial development on the Trans-Canada between Strathmore and Calgary, and I realize that Rocky View and Wheatland County want to be aggressive as far as developing commercial along the Trans-Canada, especially while it's still a major highway. What's of concern to us and what is important to us is we want to also make sure that the aesthetics of those commercial developments don't negatively impact the roadway and the travel for the people. You want to always try to attract people into your community. I realize there's a great benefit as far as jobs, but are you confident that the regional board has good control or I guess a positive say regarding the aesthetics of commercial development along that major highway? Thank you.
Well, you've raised a really good point. I mean, this is why these entities have to be a living, kind of evolving. At this point, it's not typical for a regional entity to get that precise. In other words, the local jurisdiction's supposed to do their own design guidelines. And what you're worried about is a neighboring jurisdiction not doing sufficient design guidelines. And so we have not, I'll be honest, we have not considered that in this policy framework so far. I think there will be elements in our policies that go to the energy efficiency of those buildings and the water efficiency of the buildings, which then may have impacts on landscaping and things like that. But there is a danger that the regional planning entity becomes too specific. And, on the one hand, it may be great to have a regional entity set some standards up for that level of work. On the other hand, I think some jurisdictions would feel like, wait a minute, you're going to be starting to tell us how to design our front yard, at a regional scale. So it's a delicate balance, I got to say, but I hear your concern.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your answer. It makes a lot of sense too. I guess now I'll turn to councillors if you have questions or comments regarding the growth plan report so far.
Your Worship?
Councillor Peterson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have one question, and I'm very, very grateful for the work that you and Councillor Sobel have done on our behalf and for the work of the CMIB. And as always, my ongoing haranguing about water and my concern about water usage from the beginning. I like what the CMRB has done around their water management and through the current Water Act and the 2006 South Saskatchewan River Basin Plan. I guess my question to the CMRB would be: do downriver communities dependent on drinking water have any kind of guarantee into the future around water distribution through equitable consideration, through provincial oversight? And I do know that we have a Water Act, but I still see that, the concept of first in time, first in right for water users and licensing, that not all water licenses are created equally. And I guess I worry that in the 30 to 50 years into the future, with all that we know about the precarious position of viable drinking water into the future, the CMRB, I think, is going to be our protector in that. And so I'm just wondering if you have thoughts around future management of your process into that.
I'd like Charlie or Steve to address that.
And actually, I think Jordan is probably the first one that should jump in.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much, Steve, and thank you so much, Councillor and Your Worship. Yes, water is of incredible importance to our region, and I think that what's important to note here is that the regulation that the CMRB is created under has certain requirements for us to develop for the growth plan. And then the follow-up servicing plan may contain a whole bunch of different things, including water, wastewater, stormwater, but it is there to support the growth plan. Now, I fully understand your concern, and the water dialogue has been extensive and live at the board, but I feel that, that dialogue will continue long past the development and finalization and submission of the growth plan, and how best to work on, regional water issues using the CMRB as that table. I think the really important thing here to remember is, as we are, closing on the completion of the growth plan, is this is really the end of the beginning. This is not the last thing that the CMRB will do. Yes, on the go forward, we'll be responsible for implementing and reviewing statutory plans as they come in, and reviewing them against the growth plan. However, there is a number of other initiatives that I know that the board is really interested in, including, your concern about water, regional water distribution, watershed protection, other items such as economic development that I know Charlie and Steve are going to speak to here on the rest of the presentation. So your comment is very well received. I would just say that this plan cannot address all the things that are of interest to the region. And it is, I would be surprised if water was not a main topic on the go forward work plan for the CMRB.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Anything else from our councillors? Jonathan, did you have your hand up that I missed you possibly?
Yeah, just a quick comment regarding what I think was a question on West Highway 1 area structure plan and in that area. So the West Highway 1 ASP would be grandfathered unless otherwise amended. So if it needs to be amended, then it would come to the CMRB for approval. And it is an interesting question because that's a question that the joint planning areas may address through their context studies. So presently, obviously that's not a joint planning area, but if it were, then that would be a good question and discussion with the participants, which would be Wheatland County, yourselves, and perhaps if there was a joint planning area there, Rocky View County, if it was included. So I think it's a very good point, and I think it's something perhaps in future iterations of the growth plan, or as Peter mentioned, kind of the evolution of using these tools in the region, that could be something in the future. I hope that helps.
Yes, it does. Thank you, Jonathan. Anything from our councillors? Councillor Peterson again. I don't see any other councillors with their hands up.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just had a brief question with regards to energy and utility corridors. And I was wondering if the CMRB will at some point in a future iteration speak to tertiary technology in terms of regional growth plans. And Your Worship, I'm speaking specifically to things like, economic development around tertiary levels of technology, telemedicine, education, those sorts of things. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson.
Jordan, you want to take that?
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor and Your Worship. I think kind of a similar answer to the one I just gave on water. The regulation actually outlines what must be in the growth plan. And so what we are working on is not only meeting the regulation, but bringing together a pretty bold and exciting plan that will serve the region and its residents well now and long into the future. Again, on those types of economic development questions, I think as Charlie is probably likely to present here, this is a land use plan. And so it's really focused on that development aspect of our regional growth. However, the consultants are recommending, and it's been a live discussion with the board on moving forward with some type of regional economic development. Now, whether that's a regional economic development authority, whether it's something else. I don't want to prejudge what the board would like to explore and what the outcome of that exploration would be. But again, I think it's important to note that this plan is, while very bold and very far-reaching, it's not going to cover off every item of regional interest.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to note that I think for rural communities, certainly more east of us and possibly more rural than we are, but definitely for our community too, that our economic growth will depend on our capacity to build tertiary technology. And so for our economic development, I do believe that will be a critical factor. Thank you.
Thank you. My voice cracked there. If there's no other comments or questions from councillors, we can go to the next phase of the presentation then.
Hey, Charlie, do you want to set yours up and just run it yourself? Charlie?
Sorry, there. Thank you, Your Worship. I'm looking for my share screen button. There it is. And I will go back to the PowerPoint and go back to full screen. Sorry, having some difficulty doing that.
Slideshow up at the top.
Sorry, there we go. Thank you, Steve. Okay, it's different on every platform. Thank you very much. Steve and I are going to take you on a brief tour, if you will, through the other sections of policy that, as Peter said, are really supportive of the keystone here, the keystone being the growth management and efficient use of land, where the region is planning to grow, in what forms and intensities. That's the heart of the matter, and it's no surprise that that's where the board and the committee and the tags have spent a very large portion of their discussion over the last year plus, because that's really the heart of the matter. And it's most fraught with potential difficulties and conflicts, but it's also most important in terms of the upside opportunity. One area of policy that I'll start with is economic well-being. And as Peter mentioned, this is an important regional objective. You want to continue to have a strong regional economy, and in each of these cases, there are CMRB board adopted goals that are guiding us from a high level, and then we get down to more specific questions from there. Again, take a coordinated regional approach. You will be stronger as a region if you do that, if you figure out where the best places for employment growth are going to be and support those. Important that there be adequate industrial and economic and development land available, again, across the municipalities, planned for in their own ways and in their own locations in their MDPs, but focused into the urban and hamlet areas rather than free-floating across the rural landscape, with the exception of industries that deal specifically with the agricultural economy or with resource extraction. So yes, do be about making sure there's enough land for employment. This policy does not include a regional economic development strategy, but that is, as we just were touching on, a very good idea and something that should, in our opinion, be a follow-on effort by the region. The more you practice the habit of collaboration, which of course you're doing in creating this regional growth plan in the first place, the more effective I think you can be in regional economic development strategy, and you would obviously be including private sector partners in that effort. Another key area, and you touched on it with respect to the highway capacity, is make sure that your transportation system in the region, all its modes, the highway and roadway system that you have, the transit systems that you're planning, make sure that you have people can get to work, ideally by transit or walking to their work location in whatever new future work locations are configured. and then try to preserve as much of your highway and regional highway and roadway capacity for moving freight and commerce, because one plague that you have so far avoided in the Calgary region is massive traffic congestion that not only makes the commute miserable for workers, but also reduces the efficiency of the local economy by tying up truck traffic in massive congestion. So that's something to focus on, and then to make sure that the infrastructure of roads and rails are there to support regional economic development. One thing I will emphasize in talking about a couple of these policy areas is, I've joked, Mayor Fuel, with you and some of your colleagues that, thank you for your participation in the regional planning process. You need to understand that it's a life sentence because you are going to be renewing this plan periodically. You are going to be doing follow-on efforts like a regional transportation plan, something else we believe is necessary, and a regional economic development strategy, most likely. And you're going to be updating this plan as the economy changes. We're all trying to figure out at the moment how the economy is going to appear in its new iteration post-COVID and post the massive shift of retail away from brick and mortar stores to online and delivery. And in medicine, as you mentioned, Councillor Peterson, is one area for this. Just a side note, our company, in addition to doing this kind of work, is the largest healthcare architect in the world. And believe me, every one of our healthcare clients is saying, what's the future of our hospital? How many clicks and how many bricks in terms of dealing with our patients in the future? And so this is something that that whole industry is struggling to see around the corner and understand what the future will be. And you will be, of necessity, modifying the plan over time, not only because of where growth surges and where it lags, but also because of changes in the economy like those. I'll switch this to Steve. I'll keep running the slides, Steve, if that works for you, and let you cover the next section.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Charlie. So again, number of policy areas, and they're framed around the goals that the board set for the region, not necessarily for the growth plan, but for the region. But there are some important ones, and certainly we want to speak to the important role of natural systems in the region. We also want to be, taking a leadership role. The CMR should be taking a leadership role and minimizing the impacts of development on land, air, and water. Next slide, Charlie. So one of the first areas that was looked at was flood-prone areas. Now, this isn't part of the province's required elements for the growth plan, but the board decided that it was an important one, particularly in light of the floods dating back to earlier in this decade. So there's been a lot of discussion on this. Some municipalities would like us to move to a 1 in 200 year design flood for everything. Others would like to stay directly in what the province requires at the moment. We've recommended something kind of halfway in between. So we're saying no development in the currently designated floodways by the province. We're saying mitigation of risk in the currently identified flood fringe at the 1 in 200 year, but for new greenfield development, we're saying there should be protection measures that get you to protection to the 1 in 200 year event, and that the CMRB should be working with the province to consider changing the provincial definition of the flood hazard area to the 1 in 200 year flood. So a bit of a compromise between the sort of range that some municipalities are looking at. Another area that's had lots of discussion is environmentally sensitive areas. Again, the sort of the bookends are some would like to see some simple mapping, others would like to see comprehensive integrated watershed management. Probably not an achievable element at this point in the growth plan, but certainly as a starting point, we're suggesting that area structure redevelopment plans are important. It's important they identify environmentally sensitive areas, and then where there are ESAs identified, that there be an environmental study to further understand what those effects are and the mitigation that development might have. That then rolls up to the municipal development plan level, where we're recommending that environmentally sensitive areas be mapped within each municipality in areas designated for future growth. So not the entire municipality. This is more applicable to the rural municipalities where they have huge areas that aren't being considered for growth. So focusing that mapping in those areas, including policies on eco-infrastructure, and then finally that all of this ESA mapping get compiled into a common regional database so that there's some consistency across the region, and there is a database that's available. One of the things that certainly was identified in the background work in this particular policy area is that there really isn't a good database out there of information. So before you can start having really comprehensive policy, you need to get the data to back it up. There's a short section on climate change, and again, this is not a climate change plan, but rather identification of where municipal development plans can support climate change, and it's really asking municipal development plans to have a commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and water consumption, and also policies to identify and mitigate the risks of climate change. So the next policy area is water stewardship, and this is one that I think, coming back to Councillor Peterson's first question, is near and dear to most of the municipalities in the region. And I recognize that likely what's in the growth plan is going to fall short of a lot of people's aspirations. But back to Jordan's comment, the water stewardship issue in the Calgary region is much bigger than this growth plan can address all on its own. And really, this is the starting point. So the board has set some goals around having a water strategy to promote healthy people and ecosystems and resiliency around flood and drought, and also around coordinating water, wastewater, stormwater. So we don't have a huge amount of policy. And again, this comes down to the question around, how far do we go at this point versus, what's needed to dive into this very complex area. Next slide, Charlie. So we have highlighted a few policy areas, and we've also have a strong connection to the servicing plan. One is we have some policy around watershed protection, around advocacy for headwater protection, and continuing assessment of upstream reservoirs, not only for flood protection, but also for drought conditions, and that sort of thing. And we do have some strong connections back to the South Saskatchewan Regional Plan, as really that's the level that can best address watershed-based issues. Stormwater management, we've identified the need for regional leadership coming from the CMRB, and I think that's back to Councillor Peterson's comment, and also making sure that we're identifying impacts to regional infrastructure systems where stormwater management is taking place. Water efficiency, much of what we're addressing in water efficiency comes from the land use planning and the more compact growth and the reduction in water usage that compact growth brings, but also, speaking to some future initiatives around improving the use and sharing of water. We know that the sharing of water is a big issue, and again, not going to be solved with this growth plan. The growth plan is the starting point to continue that discussion going forward in the future. And finally, some policy around collaboration and governance. Certainly strong support. When we all say it out loud for collaboration, the challenge is going to be how that actually works and the governance structures that are going to be needed to support that collaboration at the regional and sub-regional levels. Again, not going to solve it in the growth plan, but start to set the direction around it. So the next policy area is shared services optimization, and as you can probably guess from the title, this is going to be even more strongly connected to the growth plan. To the servicing plan. So the goals are next slide, Charlie. So the goals, again, coming at the board level, are around having that idea around borderless delivery of essential services, and much of that joint planning area discussion is around erasing the borders in those joint planning areas and coming up with a service delivery model that isn't about jurisdictional boundaries, but rather about where growth is going to occur and supporting that growth. There's also discussion around a fair cost benefit model. Don't know if we're going to get there in every case when we do these context studies in joint planning areas or in other areas, but certainly making a commitment to at least assess costs and benefits and looking at ways to share both costs and benefits as necessary. And the second goal is around delivering more efficient, sustainable services through optimizing those services and collaborating on those services. So again, on the policy side, really strong connection to the servicing plan. We're focused in 3 areas of transportation corridors, recreation, and energy. In the growth plan, we speak to making sure we optimize the benefits of regional corridors, transportation corridors, whether they're commuting corridors, trade corridors, transit corridors, whatever the case may be, but making sure we optimize and minimize the impacts on those corridors. Want to make sure that we have direction to support transit services and transit-oriented development that are at a regional level, and also the need to coordinate regional active transportation and recreation corridors, as the two of them are closely aligned. In many cases, your regional pathways are also your regional active transportation corridors. In the servicing plan, we get into a little bit more of what Charlie talks about around recommendations around the content and the focus of the context planning on transportation networks and on a regional transportation and transit master plan. On the recreation side, the policy was actually adopted several months ago. But it speaks to municipalities working together, creation of a regional recreational working group, and collection and sharing of data among municipalities. On the energy and utility corridor side, it will be very similar to what's in the current interim growth plan, not a major change. And I'll go back to Councillor Peterson's question on this. We did at one point float the idea of including broadband internet and that sort of thing into the regional servicing plan and into the growth plan. It's been removed at this point, recognizing to exactly what Jordan said. It's a big issue and one that probably needs to be addressed probably on its own going forward, and probably in a little stronger connection to the economic well-being components rather than sitting on its own. I know that the Edmonton region is looking at a broadband internet strategy, and that may be the kind of thing that the CMRB can come back to in the future. And with that, I'll turn it back to Charlie to speak in the last area.
Thanks, thanks, Steve. There's a section of policy dealing with the interface and the synergy between the urban and rural environment. The more directive or regulatory elements of the plan that deal with this, of course, are in that growth management and efficient use of land that Peter worked with you on earlier, and that is where in the rural environment do we expect to see growth and development, and where do we not, and at what intensities, and how well focused is it, and thus the emphasis on hamlets as the most significant concentrations of growth in the rural area. And of course, you have hamlets in Wheatland County. And those are expected as the county plans for them to, in some cases, accommodate additional growth and become a more complete community than they maybe started out as, with a few residences and a couple of businesses. But what else about the relationship between the urban and rural environment should be addressed? Well, this section of the policy talks about supporting the agricultural economy, because even though it's as a percentage of the total economic activity in the CMR is relatively small, it's important, it's culturally important, and it involves the livelihood of people that occupy, albeit at low densities, 7,000 square kilometers of land. And so therefore, the ag economy matters, and the whole region ought to care about it, not just the rurals. And so there's some provisions in here to that effect. One slightly more practical matter is look for ways to connect urban residents to locally produced food. And some of this, of course, is being done already, and encouragement for more. Make sure the infrastructure is there and remains available to support agriculture, whether that be water infrastructure through, of course, the large water district that you work with, and through roadway and rail infrastructure, and perhaps, again, broadband, because farming has become a high-tech business, just like almost every other. And then finally, a specific directive to try to mitigate the fragmentation of farmland so that it remains viable as land use, again, this is a growth plan, as land use is planned. So that is a quick tour, again, Your Worship, through the remaining principal areas of policy in the plan that are configured to support this general growth management strategy of using place types and building on the success of municipalities. A couple of general comments I would make as a long-time veteran of regional planning, both in my own region and in others. Peter and I actually worked together We sometimes hesitate to admit it, almost 30 years ago on the Portland Metropolitan Area Regional Plan, which is one that I've had a great deal of time spent on. A couple of general comments. Wanted to reiterate my point earlier that you're going to continue to do this. This plan is going to evolve. It's very important to start well, but don't try to address every issue and every what if at the first iteration of a successful regional plan. The old dictum from President Roosevelt to above all try something certainly applies. So get a good framework in place and understand that it will grow and evolve. For example, in the Portland metropolitan region, over time, the regional plan became much more specific about recreation and parks. And that will matter to Strathmore because you have an amazing set of recreation amenities there that are not just locally significant, they're regionally significant. And you're going to want to collaborate with other municipalities about sharing costs and benefits of the kind of investment that you've made. You can't script all that, in my opinion, in the first iteration of a regional plan, but you can set the table for collaboration and create the practice of collaboration through this work here. And again, I think understand that over time it's going to evolve. And in terms of services, as Steve said, this plan is not going to get down to the level of creating regional water authorities or regional water plans. As Peter noted at the outset, one thing that's suffered in the COVID environment is negotiation. We can communicate this way. We can maybe to even an extent collaborate and question one another this way. But true collaboration and negotiation, I believe, are going to get better, a lot better, when we can meet face to face once again. So when you're talking about hammering out an intermunicipal agreement for cost sharing on an infrastructure investment or a water plan, that's going to work better in subsequent months and years when we're not doing everything this way. And so with that, Your Worship, Peter and Steve and I are available for additional questions and discussion as you have time.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your report and your discussion on the plans report. Are there any questions from councillors or, I guess, administration, Jim or Doug? Seeing none, I guess, thank you very much for your presentation. And we look forward to a finalized plan coming at a reasonable time. Hopefully they'll give our next request all its full listening, I guess, and consideration. That's the word I was searching for desperately. But thank you very much. Any questions from anyone? Just a second time. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay.
And Jordan and Greg, thank you for being with us as well. All right, we'll resume our council meeting. We move on to item 5, confirmation of minutes. 5.1, the adoption of the January 13th, 2021 Committee of the Whole minutes. Councillor Peterson?
I would so move the minutes of January 13th. Yes, Committee of the Whole minutes, yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that motion. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? Thank you. That's carried. I'm trying not to vote too fast again. I've got my wife's instructions in my head. At this time, I'm looking for a motion to go into Committee of the Whole. Councillor Corbeil has a motion.
So move.
Thank you very much. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? Thank you. And that motion is carried. We're now in Committee of the Whole. At home, if you're still with us or you're resuming watching, Committee of the Whole is a slightly different version of a council meeting. It's a meeting that allows for a lot of presentation of information. There's typically no decisions made unless we do a thing called rise and report. But for the most part, it's collecting information or being given some information from different members of our staff or administration. We have no unfinished business. We have no tabled items. So that brings us to items, reports from administration. 8.1, the potential conversion therapy bylaw for 2021, which is on page 61. And speaking to that is Jeff Person. Welcome, Jeff, and good morning.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I'm very happy that you've given me some time today to talk about the proposed conversion therapy bylaw. There's a few things that we've included in the report to council there. The first, obviously, is the report. The second is a bylaw, a proposed bylaw, and the third is a bit of a report that's been prepared by Dr. Christopher Wells that covers off some important supporting information on municipalities looking to pass bylaws such as this. So a bit of a summary. This entire process is based off of the resolution approved at council in February of 2020, directing administration to draft a bylaw. Since then, we proposed and followed through on an engagement period last summer that saw over 170 people provide feedback, overwhelmingly in support of such a bylaw. We have used that feedback to model the bylaw. The bylaw that we've prepared here today is very strongly modeled off of the City of Calgary bylaw. What we did is we went through the feedback that came from the public, divided into major themes, and then looked at how those themes are reflected in the bylaw itself. So what we found is that the City of Calgary bylaw that we've used as a guide is very well suited for the feedback that we received from the community, and that it's a very good bylaw. What we're hoping is that council will accept this as information, so that this bylaw could be brought forward at a regular meeting of council quite soon, so that you can pass it as a first reading, and then we can follow through on our commitment that we made last fall, that once a bylaw was prepared, that the community would have a chance to provide feedback on that specific bylaw, rather than the concept of conversion therapy.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you very much for that presentation. Very clear. Are there any questions of Jeff from our councillors? And again, this will be coming to us at a future date for a bylaw to consider. My one question to you, Jeff, is when this comes back to us, Councillor Bauer was quite interested in ensuring that the public would have a chance to have engagement at the actual meeting. So I'm not sure if we can do that via Zoom and have people be able to contact us. It's a little more difficult as far as being able to live communicate with us. I imagine they'd have to use the Zoom link and be in waiting to be called. But she did have some concerns, and she was hoping that the public could engage at that time. Any other questions from councillors? Councillor Sobel.
Excuse me. Thank you, Your Worship, and good morning, Jeff. Thank you for the work done on this. This is a really good and detailed report. I was especially interested in the work done by Dr. Wells. Unfortunately, I think that'd be probably a good report that I would like to share on my my Facebook page, and I'm hoping that we can do that as well with the town Facebook page in regards to this bylaw. Is his report available? I can't seem to locate his report on the web. Is it possible to have that forwarded as a document that I can share?
Thank you, Worship. Absolutely, Councillor Sobel. I'm aware of a link that actually I can share with council, and I'm aware of a link that we'll be able to publish as part of promoting engagement and getting feedback from the community. So we'll make sure that that's available.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sobel. Anything else from our councillors? Seeing none, thank you for your presentation. We look forward to having this come to us again in the future. One thing I was very impressed with in the package you gave us were the various position statements from different groups, like the Canadian Psychological Association, as well as the Psychiatrists Association. I think those are pretty important to people to realize the differentiation as far as how they view gender identity and how people feel about their sexuality as it not being a mental illness, which I thought was a very clear thing. It gives us a lot of understanding of their viewpoint. So thank you. Councillor Sobel, sorry.
Your Worship, I move that we Council accepts this report for information purposes.
I don't think we can make a motion because we're...
Oh, you're right. Sorry. Yep.
That's okay. I'm learning.
My bad.
I'm learning.
I'll withdraw that motion, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. And again, Jeff, thank you for your presentation. Fancy. I didn't realize we could do that. Ooh. The podium lowered, in case you're at home and didn't see that. It was like magic. All right, that brings us to 8.2, Development Services Department update. And we have Mr. Chuck Proctor with us this morning. And I know that's going to be very exciting to all of us. So welcome, Chuck.
Chuck.
I'll just say that again. Thanks, Your Worship. Thanks, Council. Good morning, everybody. I've got a brief presentation for you today. It's roughly 10 slides. I'll be under 10 minutes. I'll try to move quickly through here. Everybody has a copy of this presentation in their agenda. So just a brief table of contents for this morning. I'm going to start with the Development Services introduction, go over a staff overview, talk about the COVID-19 pandemic briefly, go over 2020 year in review and key highlights, talk about some stats from last year, and then talk about a forward on to 2021. So just a quick introduction to my Department of Development Services. We're a public-facing department that facilitates the growth and development in Strathmore. We're responsible for all sorts of things like building permits, development permits, plumbing, electrical, gas permits, business licenses, subdivisions, area structure plans, the land use bylaw, and the MDP, lots of stuff. Kind of our mission and model, facilitating development, upholding high standards, promoting the town, promoting your project, protecting your investments. That's kind of our mission and motto. I'll just go over a brief staff overview. We have 7 staff, and I'm just going to say a couple nice things about each of us. There are some new faces in our department that we're excited to tell you about too. So just to start things off with Audrey, she's a development admin assistant. She's going to be celebrating her 10-year anniversary with the town in May, which I think is great. Audrey recently joined the Internal Workers' Health and Safety Committee and is one of our fire wardens in our department at the new town hall. Meetza is also a development admin assistant and also an associate development officer. Meetza recently completed her applied land use planning certificate from the University of Alberta in summer 2020. Last fall, Meetza was promoted to her new position, and she's been helping out with development permits. Kathy Jones is our development officer for the town. She's celebrating 11 years with the town in May. She processes a bunch of permits every year. Recently, Kathy's taken on the role of quality management plan manager, which essentially is involved in monitoring the plumbing, electrical, gas, and building permit process for the town. Kathy's also involved in all of our audits. Harry Soms, our safety code building officer. Harry's been with the town for 23 years, which I think is great. He's taken on a variety of different roles. I want to congratulate Harry today on his semi-retirement as of this March. Harry's going to semi-retire. It's hard to really summarize 23 years of service at the town, but really he's done a ton for the town and worked many different roles. Like I said, he's been a great mentor with our department and someone that we look up to. We have 2 new senior planners at the town of Strathmore who started recently in January. We have Ashley Foster. She's recently worked at Palliser Regional Municipal Services in Hanna. Before that, she worked in real estate development for Loblaws, so she has some private side experience. Before that, Ashley worked at the Calgary Airport Authority as a planner. Interesting fact about Ashley, she's a former world champion athlete in Taekwondo, so we kind of have some extra security in development services, which is awesome. Megan Williams is another one of our new senior planners. She most recently is joining us from Wheatland County. where she was involved with many projects there, council presentations, subdivisions, development permits, etc. Before Wheatland County, Megan worked in the MD of Opportunity, Wabaska. She brings some strong analytical and research skills to our team and has already made some improvements with the subdivision process in her first couple weeks. So that's just a brief staff overview. I think we got a great team with 7 staff members in development services. Just quickly on to Chapter 3 here, the COVID-19 pandemic. So as everybody knows, this kind of hit the world in February, March of last year, North America anyway. We maintained service levels remotely. We took our phones and computers home. We answered inquiries, delivered permits and documents. We continued meetings internally and externally and kind of tried our best to maintain service levels. 2 staff were also posted at the Emergency Command Center with Trent as well. Okay, moving on to Chapter 4, just some key projects. The Solarcraft Capital Power solar power plant is one of the ones that I'm most proud of. This is 320 acres of solar panels of industrial land owned by the town in Strathmore. So this project was approved in 2019, and we worked throughout 2020 on the Alberta Utilities Commission process. Solarcraft and Capital Power required some information and support from the town of Strathmore. In the fall of 2020, the project received Alberta Utilities Commission approval, which was a great way to end last year. And also in December of last year, we received our first lease payment. I just think this is such an exciting partnership between Capital Power, who is Alberta's largest energy generator, and Strathmore. We're looking forward to next steps on this project, which involve construction in the spring of 2021. Another one of our key projects last year was the Marigold Library and Western Irrigation Joint Use Headquarters Facility. Much like the town of Strathmore, we were kind of outgrowing our current, WD and Marigold were outgrowing their current offices, and we're looking for a new space. In 2018 and 2019, we worked with these groups on subdivision and zoning. And most recently, last year in 2020, we worked on the building permit and development permit for them. This is an exciting project. It's moving quite quickly. This is down near Tina's No Frills, south of the highway there. And we're just excited that both of these groups chose Strathmore to have their headquarters in town, and we're excited for them. Just like we have our new office, we're excited to see them get a new office as well. Just the last part of our kind of key projects, key highlights of 2020, we had an audit last year by the Safety Codes Council of Alberta. They had to change too with the pandemic, and the audit occurred virtually or remotely in November 2020. This included a review of building permits, plumbing, electrical, gas permits. They took a bunch of files of ours with us, looked through them, make sure that we were doing everything that we were supposed to do, and we received some recommendations and some positive notes from the Safety Codes Council. So Development Services is regularly audited, and we received good news in November. We've got another audit coming up in March of this year by a different group. So just stats. I just want to apologize quickly to council. There's an error in my first bullet point on this slide, and on page 3 of your report. There's a number 13,740,000. That number is incorrect. The correct number is $22,739,000. I just missed a decimal point there. I apologize to council. So ignore that 13 million. This first bullet point should read, in 2020, we issued a total of 130 development permits, 18 dwelling units, and had an overall construction value of $22,739,000. When compared to 2019, in 2019, we issued a total of 151 development permits, 24 dwelling units, and we had an overall construction value of $21,340,000. So although not a perfect indicator of the economic conditions in Strathmore, these stats kind of help paint the picture that although it was a global crisis, global pandemic, we still had a fairly normal year in terms of construction. In 2020, we issued a total of 113 real property reports. In 2019, we issued a total of 135. Again, not a perfect indicator of the economy, but this kind of indicates that there was a similar amount of houses changing hands. And then finally, the last 2 bullet points on slide 5 or chapter 5. In 2020, we issued 168 electrical, 140 gas, and 93 plumbing permits, versus in 2019, we issued 186 electrical, 134 gas, and 75 plumbing permits. So it's kind of interesting to compare the two 2 years. You know, 2019 was kind of a normal year. There was no COVID-19. There was nothing like that. It was regular. And then 2020, we had a global crisis. And it's just interesting to compare the stats. Just on to my last chapter 6 here, forward on to 2021. Development Services is going to maintain service levels this year. We're having a planning year, working on our municipal development plan, updating our policies, procedures, land use bylaw, kind of getting our ducks in a row on some of those larger projects. We're preparing for construction season, which is starting soon. We've already had some nibbles and bites of new houses coming to Strathmore, new projects coming in, so we're excited for that. Staff will be approaching council again soon with an update on the municipal development plan. Again, this is Strathmore's highest level planning document, and we look forward to talking to you again about it, likely in the spring. And then again, staff will be bringing forward a preliminary report regarding cost recoveries and our fee schedule, again, the spring-summer timeline with that one. So I just want to thank council and members of administration for listening to me. I'm happy to talk about this report and any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck, for your report. It definitely sounds like 2020 turned out to be a better year than we had thought it would, and that's a good indication of your staff too, as well as the resiliency of the staff in the town and the confidence that people still have in Strathmore. So that is some good news for us. It was a tough year. Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Worship. I have a quick question for you, Chuck. Thank you for the report. I appreciate it. Will anything like the CMRB, their plan and stuff like that, and what they bring forward, does that have any impact on our MDP at all?
Thanks, Councillor Corbeil. That's an excellent question. So the answer is yes, it will impact our municipal development plan. We'll need to include some of their policies that they're working on into that plan. Also, when they are finally adopted these things that the CMRB is working on, they're requiring municipalities to add some more information into their MDP. We don't quite know what this looks like yet, but our goal is to do our best to include this information so we don't have to go back and amend the ASP next year or the year after. So I guess the short answer is yes, it does affect our MDP. We're aware of some policies that we're going to try to fit into this current refresh on there. Thank you, Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Corbeil. Any other questions for Chuck? Oh, we have Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you. Chuck, one question I had, and thank you for the report and for all the work that you and your department are doing. One question I had just has to do with the recommendations by the Alberta Safety Codes Council. I'm just wondering what some of those recommendations were.
Again, a good question, Councillor Montgomery. I think one of the biggest ones is we have to maintain, my department needs to continue to work on closing files in a timely manner. So I guess when a permit is all said and done, say a plumbing, electrical, gas permit is done, it's been applied for, it's been inspected, all that kind of stuff, there's a little report that goes out at the end of that permit called a PSR. And historically, the town has been always a couple months or even a year behind in sometimes on these PSR reports. Of the files that the Safety Code Council did look at, our PSRs were done within a couple months, but they would like to see us improve that timeline. So that was one of the big ones. Ensuring that we have all proper dates and everything signed on all the applications too was another big one. Sometimes it's easy to miss a date on an application or miss one of the pages to sign. There's lots of things to sign and date on that. I think other than that, those were our big ones. I can follow up with Jim too to make sure that I haven't missed anything, and maybe we can get an email out with a full report if you'd like, Councillor Montgomery, of that audit if you want more information there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chuck. I guess I'll think about that if I want to wade through that report. And the other question I have, I guess, just to follow up on Councillor Corbeil's question, what sort of, just for, I guess, like the public's knowledge, what sort of considerations are you taking into account with, to kind of fit in with the CMRB or prospective CMRB rules?
Thanks, Councillor Montgomery. A very good question again. The municipal development plan is the highest level planning document in Strathmore, and it's going to provide a framework for the next step of planning, which is area structure plans. And all those area structure plans will need to meet all of those density requirements and everything that the CMRB kind of talked about this morning. So we're going to try to provide a good framework in our current MDP to inform the next level of planning the best that we can at this point. You know, I think we'll need to do a good job at you know, circulating to the CMRB and engaging with them to make sure that we've collected all that information and that we have it up front and center in the plan so that when a developer comes in for a new area structure plan, it's easy for them to grasp all the requirements, not only of the town, but of the CMRB as well. So we've been kind of really paying attention to CMRB meetings and making sure that all of the policies that board is working on are going to be reflected in our current municipal development plan. All stuff about you know, mixed use TOD centers, master plan communities, all that kind of stuff is very important to have in our municipal development plan and make sure that that's mentioned so the next level of planning is informed and we have a good framework. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chuck.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Councillor Sobel.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Chuck. Enjoyed learning about your new staff and what you folks do through the year. It's greatly appreciated. Moving on to the CMRB topic once again, I think it's important to recognize you and some other fellow staff members who regularly attend and are involved in the TAG meetings, which is the technical support. Mayor Fuel and myself sit at committee chairs for CMRB, but it's you folks that are doing all the real work, and it is a lot of work, but I think it's important that you're at that table, at the TAG table, because of things like our MDP and et cetera. So just wanted to thank you for doing that. It's a long road, and sometimes we don't even see the end of that road, but eventually we will get to it, and with your assistance, we'll be able to create something that keeps us in line with the growth plan rather. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Councillor Sobel, thank you. And we'll move on to Deputy Mayor Peterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to say that at the behest of council, I sit on 3 building committees within the community, and the level of professional commitment and competency that has been demonstrated by this department has been recognized by individuals on those committees and the professionals that dedicate themselves or are hired by those committees to bring forward the buildings that are underway. And this team has received a lot of accolades through that process for their assistance, for their integrity and their honesty and being straightforward, but mostly, Your Worship, just for their kindness and helpfulness and willingness to be supportive in the most efficient manner. And as a councillor for this community, I'm really proud of them and grateful for that level of professional competency. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. And on behalf of myself, Chuck, thank you for all your work with the TAG groups, because your staff, there's a lot of times on that board meeting, the jargon and the technical information is overwhelming. So it's really a relief to know that you and your staff are a big part of it and you know what the heck's going on. So I look to you guys for advice and guidance too. So thank you, and thank you for your report. Mr. Simpson, Jim.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to expand a bit on staff that has been working on the TAG committees with the CMRB. Ethan from our infrastructure department, Ethan Wilson, has been representing Strathmore on the water and transportation groups. And Mark Pretzlaff from the recreation area has been representing us on the recreation servicing aspect. However, we kind of all know the recreation has kind of taken a back seat in this servicing plan, but we have the three of them, and they're attempting and trying to attend every meeting. However, it is overwhelming at times. It's a lot of staff time that is spent on these committees, but I just wanted to recognize the other two fellows that were working on these tag committees. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Jim. We definitely don't want to forget anyone for sure. Thank you very much, Tuck. Thank you, Jim. And at this time, we'll carry on. We have no urgent business. Administrative inquiries? No. We have no in-camera items, so at this time, I'm looking for a motion to come out of in-camera. Pardon me.
I move to come out of committee.
Thank you. A motion to come out of committee of the whole. I have no idea what I just said, but thank you. All in favor? And that motion is carried, and then a motion to adjourn. We have a motion to adjourn from Councillor Sobel.
No, Your Worship.
No, Your Worship, I'd like to rise and report.
Oh, okay.
I would like to move that Council receive the information on the proposed conversion therapy bylaw for information purposes.
Your Worship, just a suggestion, Council may want to add bringing the bylaw forward at the next regular Council meeting for consideration.
And I would like to add that the bylaw be brought forward at the next regular Council meeting.
Jen, do we need a motion to be able to rise and report? No. Okay, thank you. So I have heard your motion. I think everybody understands it. So we have a motion in the rise and report portion to accept that information as well as direction to bring it to a future council meeting. I'll call the motion. All in favor? And that motion is carried. And a motion to adjourn now since we're Councillor Peterson.
Your Worship, I would move that Council receive the Development Services Department update for information.
Okay, thank you very much. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? Thank you. That motion is carried.
Your Worship, I would move adjournment.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Peterson. We have a motion to adjourn at 10:48. All in favor? And the motion is carried. Thank you, everyone, for being here this